Okay, this video is going to just sort of sum up everything that we're learning about linear equations, and so I hope sort of seeing it all together will help make sense of some of this. So just remember, the standard form of a linear equation is in that ax plus by is equal to c format. So if you have something like 2x plus 4y is equal to 8. Just notice the a term is the 2, the b term is the 4, the c term is the 8. And that's what we just consider standard form. And that's an easy form to determine what your intercepts are. So, remember that our x-intercept is going to be where the line that this equation represents crosses this x-axis. So any point on this line, y is equal to 0. So if I just list all these points over here, if I said, look at this point right here, well, that is 3, 0, right? If I list one over here, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 5, 0. So anything along this x-axis, that y is 0. So we can look at any of our equations and set y equal to 0, and then determine what those x and y intercepts are. And we're going to look at that on this equation. So we have 4x plus 6y is equal to 12. So if I'm looking for that x-intercept, remember we're going to set that y term equal to 0. So that means 4x plus 6 times 0 is equal to 12. Well, 6 times 0 is just 0, so that leaves us with 4x is equal to 12. Well, then if we divide by 4, we get x is equal to 3. But remember, that is on the x-axis. So that ordered pair is at 3, 0. So it has to be along this x-axis for the x-intercept. And so we're here at 3, 0. Because remember, all we need to do is find 2 points on the line. And once we find 2 points on the line, then we can draw our straight line. So our y-intercept, it's got to cross this y-axis. That's telling us where does it cross this line at. And that's what we're going to find. So that y-intercept is where the x term is equal to 0. So think about any of your ordered pairs that's along this y-axis. It's going to be 0 for the x term and then whatever point we're going to. So for your y-intercept, you're going to set x equal to 0. So that means 4 times 0 plus 6y is equal to 12. Well, 4 times 0 is just 0, plus 6y is equal to 12. Well, that just leaves us with the equation 6y is equal to 12. If I divide both terms by 6, I get y is 2. So it crosses that y-intercept at 2, which is the ordered pair 0, 2, which would be right there. And so once we know those 2 points on the line, then we can just draw a straight line through those 2 points, and that is the graph of the equation 4x plus 6y is equal to 12. So that is how you find the intercepts. All right, so one other thing to remember when you're talking about slope is that or talking about linear equations, is that we always refer to that slope. And remember, slope is often represented by the term or the letter m in an equation. And anytime you're given 2 points on the line, so two sets of ordered pairs, and one is just the first set, so x1 and y1, and the other one would be your second one, so y2, x2 and y2. You're going to use this equation. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Slope is also referred to as rise over run. So even if you have a graph and you're looking at a line that goes through somewhere in this graph, you can find 2 particular points on here and just see how many am I rising up, how many am I running over to get to that? So you can, if you're just looking at a graph, remember you can just count rise over run and determine what that slope is. It's also referred to as that change in the y value over the change in the x value, which totally represents this equation. Change in y is the difference between the two y values, and change in x is the difference between the two x values. So anytime, no matter what the question is asking you, if you are given 2 points on the line, the only thing you can do is find slope. So this is an equation that you need to remember. Okay, so let's go label all of these. Let's see. Let's say this is my x1. This is my y1. This is my x2. And this one we'll say is our y2. So, okay, we're going to use this equation. So y2 is 2. I shouldn't have used that purple. y1 is -3. But remember, the equation is minus y1. So we cannot drop one of those negative signs. So that's 2 minus -3, which ends up being +3 in the end. So on the bottom, then we find the difference in those two x values. Well, x2 is 4, and we're subtracting from it x1, which is -1. Well, remember, anytime you have those those negative signs out in front of those parentheses or another, you're subtracting a negative number, that really means to add it. So 2 plus 3 over 4 plus 1. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and 4 plus 1 is 5. And 5 divided by 5 would be 1. So in this instance, we have the slope, or m as it's often referred to, is 1. All right, so keep that in mind. So now we have the slope-intercept form of a linear equation, that y equals mx plus b. And that is the easiest way to graph a linear equation. So remember that b represents your y-intercept of the line. So this is my b, represents the y-intercept. M always refers to the slope of the line, so that's going to be that m, this number that's here. Now, if you're given an equation, let's just take one here on the side. For example, if you're given one that says 2x plus 4y is equal to 8. Okay, remember, look up above. That is our standard form. That is not in slope-intercept form, but we can easily put it in slope-intercept form. All we're doing is isolating that y term, and so we're just going to move everything away from him. So we would start off by moving that entire x term over, which means we would subtract it from both sides. Well, that constant, that 8 and that 2x, are not like terms, so they cannot be joined together. So we're left with 4y is equal to -2x plus 8. And then once you've isolated that term that has that y in it, then you want to divide by that 4 to isolate just the y term. So that leaves us with y is equal to -2 over 4, which is really just 1/2, x plus the 8 over 4, which is 2. So you notice how even if we're given something in standard form here, we can easily turn it into that slope-intercept form, and from that we could go graph or whatever we needed to do. So here's one that's already in our slope-intercept form for us, and we're just told to graph it. So let's create a little chart here. Now, given this equation, y is equal to negative 2x plus 5, let's remember what we've learned. So the b term here would be the 5 that's at the end, and that is our y-intercept. So we have a y-intercept at 5. Well, again, what does that mean? That means it's going to be where it crosses the y-axis. So given that information, we also know that ordered pair would be at 0, 5. Let me separate these two so you don't think we're talking about the same thing. So let's go put that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be right there. So next we know that the slope, or the m here, is negative 2. So we know we have a slope of negative 2, which means you're going to rise negative 2 and run over 1. Any whole number is always over 1. So from the y-intercept, the point that you already know on the line, we're going to go down 2 and over 1, because we've got to create that line. So down 2 units over 1 unit. And you can keep doing that. Go down 2 more over 1, down 2 more over 1, but you just need 2 points to make that line. So there it is. So I hope that's clear. Do we want to do it? We may want, let's just do another one real quick. Well, let's look at the one that I made over there. Y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 2. Well, try to think about this on your own. What's my y-intercept? Is at 2. What is the slope? Well, my slope is at negative 1/2. So notice again, if it is in this standard form, we don't know what the slope is. That's our a, b, and c term. We don't know what m is until we've put it in this slope-intercept form here. So it's got to be in y is equal to mx plus b in order to graph it using that y-intercept and the slope. So let's create another coordinate grid. And remember, you always start with, make sure they're two colors. Start with your y-intercept, which is at positive 2 in this instance. So we're going to use our y-intercept is at positive 2. Then for that slope, we're going, because we've got a negative slope, we're going to run down negative 1. No, we're not. Sorry. We're going to rise negative 1, then we're going to run over 2, and we're getting that negative 1/2. So, rise negative 1, run over 2. Oh, why won't it change colors? Here, there we go. So there's my slope. Down 1 over 2. So down 1 over 2 more would put me here. Down 1 unit over 2 more would put me here. That would be, then we could draw our straight line. Okay. So you can keep practicing that. You can go to different websites. You can look at some of those of your homework problems and maybe try to work that out. And practice on that some more if you need to. All right, so for the point slope form of a linear equation is y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. Well, remember, m always represents your slope. The only way to find slope is, given those 2 points on a line, you have to use your slope formula. So anytime you're asked to do this, you've got to go through, to find the equation, you've got to find out what the slope is first. So that is always the first thing you're going to do. And remember, your slope formula is m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And remember, here's just because this is my first term that I'm given, my first point is x1 and y1. My second point will just be my x2 and my y2. So let's use this formula first. Let's find our slope. So we've got 2 minus negative 3 over 4 minus negative 1 is 2 plus 3, 4 plus 1, which is 5 over 5, which is 1. So that's the same one we did before. So now we know that we have our slope, or the m, is equal to 1. Well, now we need that x1 and y1. And remember, this is going to be any point that's on the line. So I'm just going to, and it doesn't matter which one of these points we use. We can use either one. But I'm going to use the one that's all positive. So I'm going to use that point 4, 2 as my x1 and y1, just because he's going to be easier to work with because he's all positive. Okay, so now we're going to look at that equation, which is our point slope formula. And that is y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. And let's just remember our slope here is the m. And the point on the line, let's do our first one, that's my x1. He's going to go right there. And my y1 is the 2. And so I'm going to put him in right there. Okay. So we have y minus our y1, which is the 2, is equal to our slope m, which is 1, times x minus x1, which was 4. All right, from that point, you're just going to go solve the equation. So you're going to distribute this 1 to everything inside the parentheses. So y minus 2 is equal to x minus 4. And then you're just moving this term over so that you're getting that y by itself. So y is equal to x minus 2. So this form right here is my point slope form, and then we have solved that equation. So that step 3 is to solve it, and we can put it in our y-intercept. Y is equal to mx plus b format. So from there, if you just want to go graph it, given this y equals mx plus b, you should be able to tell me now where the y-intercept is, what the slope is. So for this equation, we have a y-intercept at -2, because it represents that. And then we have a slope of 1, because there's an imaginary 1 in front of that single x. Okay, so we're going to go over to -2 on our y-axis and graph that. A slope of 1 means I'm going to rise 1 and run over 1. So up 1, then over 1. That's my next point on the line. Up 1, over 1. So we could keep doing that, but all we really need are 2 points on that line to draw a straight line. All right, so you do have a few special cases. You have your horizontal lines. So remember, there is no x in that equation. We've probably talked about in our lessons. HOI stands for horizontal line at y is equal to some number. So if you have y is equal to 2, you can automatically look at that and say, oh, well, that's got to be a horizontal line. It's a HOI. So y is equal to 2. So we're going to go up here where y is always equal to 2, draw a horizontal line. And if it's a vex, we say x is equal to some number. We call it a vex because it's a vertical line. At x is equal to some number. So verticals running up and down, it tells you where x is at -3. So there's the equation there's the graph for that line or that equation. Sorry. All right, so next thing you need to remember, parallel lines have the same slope, and perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. All right, so you're given an example of a problem is write the equation of the line that passes through this point and is parallel to this equation. Well, when we see this, we know it's got to have the same slope. So it's parallel to this equation. Well, what's the slope of that equation? We don't know what the slope is unless it's in that y equals mx plus b format, so then we know what m is. That's in standard form. So we've got to move that 3 over and make it in slope-intercept form to solve for that slope. So y is equal to -3x plus 9. Well, that tells me my slope is at -3. Well, then we know the slope and we know a point on the line. So knowing the slope, knowing a point on the line, we're going to use point-slope formula, which is y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. Okay, so remember again, slope, -3, that's often referred to as the m, and then our point on the line, remember, first term is always x, second term is always y. So we're going to put the slope in for the m. We'll put our x1, our 4, in for this term here at the end, and then the y1 term right there. So we're going to have y, let me come over here so I've got room, y minus y1, which is -7, is equal to the slope, which is -3, times x minus x1, and x1 is 4. And then we're just going to solve from here. So that gives us y plus 7 is equal to, and we're distributing that -3, so -3 times x is -3x, -3 times -4 is plus positive 12. Then all we have to do is move that 7 over to get the equation y is equal to -3x plus 5. And that's the equation to that line. That's parallel to this line, but passes through this point. All right, so same thing on a perpendicular line, except for we have opposite reciprocal slopes. So, you know, again, maybe you've practiced this. If the original line has a slope of 1/3, then a perpendicular line is going to be -3. So opposite means the sign. If it's positive on one, it's going to be negative on the other. If it's negative on the original line, it'll be positive on the perpendicular line. Reciprocal just means we're going to flip that fraction. And any whole number, remember, is always over 1. All right, so if we're going to write the equation of a line that passes through the point 2, 6, and is perpendicular to the line with this equation. Well, what's the slope of this equation? Well, this one's already in y is equal to mx plus b format, so in this instance, the slope is at 1/2. Well, not asking for that slope, it's asking for the perpendicular slope. Well, if it's perpendicular to this line, and this one is positive 1/2, our perpendicular slope is going to be the opposite, which is negative. And if we flip that fraction, then we have 2/1, which is just 2. So for this one, m, or our slope, is equal to -2 for our perpendicular line. And then we have the point, that it passes through, -2, 6. Okay, so this is my x1, and that's my y1 in the same equation. So y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So y minus our y1, which is 6, is equal to our slope, which is -2, times x minus x1, which is -2 also. Okay, we're going to solve for it. Y minus 6 is equal to, distributing this, -2x. Remember, this makes a plus 2. Then we're multiplying it times -2. So that's going to be -4. Then all we have to do is add this 6 over. So the equation of the line becomes y is equal to -2x plus 2. And hopefully you could be able to go graph those. All right, if you have any other questions on linear equations, please do not hesitate to ask me. Thank you.